Which window program is ready to pop in the SEC this year? That's Fenton of Yahoo Sports joining me here to discuss on the show, live and in person, recording at SEC Media Days. This be Thursday, of course. And so I'm just thinking about Ole Miss and Missouri specifically, because those are two teams that I think a lot of people fairly, given their recent track records, would be described as window programs, where you got to build up and you got an opportunity and you got to seize it because it's not going to be back next year. And Ole Miss, they feel like they have that opportunity. And Missouri, they haven't lost a lot to the portal. They lost their defensive staff, but both of those teams feel like they have big opportunities. Which one do you think wins more games in 2024?
Just for context, are we putting in that top tier Georgia, Texas, Alabama?
Yes.
Okay, fair.
Yes.
Between Ole Miss and Missouri, I have to go Ole Miss. And that's not to say that I don't think that Missouri has the opportunity to be a playoff team, because I absolutely do. Also, looking at their schedule, I understand that they play Alabama and Georgia. Tough draw. But outside of that, it's a manageable schedule. But I go Ole Miss because there are fewer question marks as far as talent. What was the number one issue that Lane Kiffin addressed that Ole Miss that's why they couldn't beat Georgia, why they couldn't be that top-tier SEC program? Well, they weren't physical enough, and they weren't big enough on the defensive side of the ball.
Trench play. It came down to
the trenches. How do you win and lose in this league? In the trenches. So what does he do? He goes out and gets Walter Nolan, the number one defensive player not named Caleb Downs in the transfer portal. He goes out and gets Princely Umamielen, who comes in with a ton of experience and was really effective for Florida last year. So any deficiency that we could have identified on Ole Miss's roster, they didn't just address it. They didn't just fill it with a name. They filled it with a really good and experienced player. So my question about Ole Miss is, can you make everything vibe? Can you make everything click? Can everything come together? All of the pieces in the transfer portal that they brought in on both sides of the ball, that's a lot, to come together and all make sure that it's one cohesive unit. That's really my biggest question with Ole Miss, though. Can it work? Can it all fit together? It's not a matter of talent.
Yeah, I love what they did this offseason, not just bringing in a lot of players, not just bringing in talented players, but bringing in what feels like the right guys for the needs. Yeah, very strategic additions. And I think Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, who's been described as the portal king, and he talked earlier last week at SEC Media Days about how I've had some success in the portal. I was like, that's a humble way to put it.
Lane, you have.
Yeah.
But I think Ole Miss is going to be an interesting case study because we've seen it's a new transfer portal era, right? We're only a few years into it.
We're like two cycles, two or three cycles.
We feel like we know, we have everything figured out. We don't. I think we know that you can't ignore the transfer portal.
Right.
You can't be Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers.
Well, we'll see. So
far, you can't do that.
True.
So far, at least the formula that feels like it works is developing talent out of high school and recruiting 4s and 5 stars and being a top recruiting class in the country, for a few years, and also supplementing in the portal, a healthy mix of both. Right now, it seems like you cannot be that program that just completely dismisses the transfer portal because everybody else is getting better and you're not. What we don't know yet is, can you be a transfer portal team? Can you be a team that's successful
Colorado.
by building a team and a roster, not building a program, not building up a deep recruiting roots? It's, we're going to build a team and we're going to find the most talented players in the transfer portal that can come and help us right away. And if they're here for 1 year, they're here for 1 year because we're focused on this year.
Yeah, I think it's become even more so for coaches that are more entrenched at their schools or have the ability to succeed. It's a year-to-year proposition.
Totally.
And there are certainly exceptions. You look at Hugh Freeze at Auburn, for instance, is a great example of, they should be better this year. And I talked about that last week on the show. They should be better. But does anyone expect them to microwave this into, hey, go make the SEC championship game? I don't think even Auburn fans do. But you mentioned the portal high school balance, and coaches get asked about this a lot, and people talk about it. And I think it's an interesting conversation because you look at a place like USC, who plays LSU week 1 in Las Vegas on Sunday, standalone game. It should be fantastic. Yeah, you're an LSU girl.
It's gonna be awesome.
It is going to be awesome. But so USC brought in all those transfers year 1, and it worked. I know they lost the Pac-12 championship game and lost the Cotton Bowl in terrible fashion if you're a USC fan to Tulane, but they went 11-1. Like that was it working. But then year 2, to take a step back, go 7-5. in the regular season. I think it's why
with the Heisman Trophy winning
with a
quarterback.
Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. I think it's why it's still a case study. Clemson's at one end, Colorado's at the other end. Everybody else is in the middle in different ways on that spectrum of how much of your roster needs to be from the transfer portal and how much needs to be built from your high school recruiting class. And I think Ole Miss is kind of closer to the Colorado side, but I don't think they're all the way over there.
And I don't think that you're going to have a team that's just completely made up of transfer portal players, because you're always going to be recruiting. And I don't know if a coach can comfortably do that and say that, oh, like I'm going to be here in 3 years if I'm not recruiting. But I think that Ole Miss is the closest thing that we have seen to a quote unquote super team or a portal team, or the closest thing to purely NFL free agency that we've seen in the modern transfer
it's even
portal
more
era.
open. The NFL free agency has restrictions.
Yeah.
There are no limits on the
portal.
portal.
There are contracts.
Yeah. There are like actual obligations.
Like you are contractually obligated to play there.
You can't, in the NFL, you can't become a free agent whenever you want.
Yeah, Brandon Ayuk, like if he was in college, he'd be in the portal.
Oh, he would have hit the portal months ago.
He'd be gone.
Yeah, that's a great
He'd be at Ole Miss.
example. Yeah. yeah, that's exactly right. But I want to talk about the other team we mentioned at the start of this segment. That's Missouri. They're kind of an enigma to me because they definitely popped up last year, and they have been more of that kind of window program. And I think the question for them is this the final year of the window, or was last year the window? And did they just not have a 12-team playoff to be a part of and have all the stars kind of aligned for that sort of year? Because I look at Missouri and I think I know you got Brady Cook, I know you have Luther Burden, I know you have Eli Drinkwitz back, like that's all great. But is the rest of the team on the same level as Ole Miss to push for a playoff spot? Can they really rise that far above Tennessee or Oklahoma or all these other teams that probably aren't SEC title contenders but are going to try to be 10-2 and make the playoff at the end of the year? That's what I just don't know. I don't have a feeling one way or the other on Missouri. What do you think?
Where is your apprehension? Just the level of talent? I'm going to pull up their schedule. I'm not ignoring you.
Yeah. I'd say the overall talent level, and though I think Eli Drinkwitz is clearly a good coach, I've seen him do this once, where he plays at that sort of level. Now, if you had a 12-team playoff in 2024, Missouri certainly would have been in it. But I don't know. It could just be a trust factor because we've watched Missouri for a long time. They haven't been good consistently. So maybe that's just me instinctually having trouble trusting them. But people could say the same thing about Ole Miss, and I'm with you. I feel really good about Ole Miss's chances
I feel good about Ole Miss's chances, but I also need to see Lane Kiffin win some of these big games.
That's true, and I think that's a fair apprehension to have and a question to ask. And at Missouri, I know you just brought up their schedule. Theirs, I think, is one of the most favorable in the SEC, and I think that's why their win total is higher. Like, I don't know if they're actually one of the 3 best rosters in the SEC. I think they're a good team that has a really favorable schedule.
They are not one of the 3 best rosters in the SEC. Georgia is above Missouri. I think Alabama would be above Missouri. Texas would be above Missouri. I would put LSU above Missouri. Ole Miss above Missouri. But all of those other programs, or some of those other programs that I mentioned, have more questions than maybe Missouri doesn't. The defensive coaching staff, I think, is a massive deal. Blake Baker came in the 2020, at the end of the 2021 season, and Missouri was one of the worst defenses in all of college football. Year 1, they're up to like the 50s. Year 2, they're one of like a top 25 ranked defense, and they've got first-round draft picks, which is not. It might be a little bit more few and far between at Missouri versus other SEC programs of consistently churning out first-round talent. We are going to see how important not just Blake Baker, but also Kevin Peoples was to that defense, the defensive line coach. They both went to LSU. But it's Brady Cook and Luther Burden to me. Luther Burden's the best wide receiver in the SEC.
That guy is
like whatever we
such a
say about
baller.
Luther Burden, we're not talking about him enough.
I remember the
if Luther
touchdown.
Burden played at Alabama.
Yeah.
He would be a household name. I don't care if you're a football nut
I think
or
he'd
not.
be a dark horse Heisman candidate at a bigger school.
I think he's a Heisman candidate now, and I think that he should be considered a Heisman candidate. He's the best receiver in the SEC, one of the best, if not the best receivers in all of college football. The question offensively that I have with Missouri is, what does this run game look like without Cody Schrader being your bell cow back? He was leading leading rusher in the SEC last year. I think they're going to adopt more of a running back by committee until a quote unquote bell cow back kind of separates himself from the rest of the pack if and when that does in fact happen. So with a kind of a changed up run game, when Brady Cook doesn't have that kind of safety and security net of Cody Schrader that he really trusts, how much does this offense change? Maybe it doesn't, but maybe it does kind of change Brady Cook. I think that Missouri, let's look at their schedule. Murray State, Buffalo,
Okay.
Boston College.
I haven't heard a loss yet.
Vanderbilt.
Still haven't.
At Texas A&M.
Okay, and there you can lose that game.
This is my favorite game in the SEC this year.
Okay, hit me.
At UMass.
Oh God.
Who the hell plays at UMass? Like,
Did you see the unfortunate video for UMass of the guy saying what their stadium was? That's tough. That's tough.
So
but maybe it'll get better when they join. They're going to join the Mid-American Conference. So hopefully it gets better.
You know what
for
they say
for
about
all
the
the
Mid-American
UMass fans out there.
Auburn at home, at Alabama, at home against Oklahoma.
That's the stretch. That's the stretch right there. Those three
At
games.
South Carolina.
We're gonna know. I think early on, Missouri's gonna win their first 5 games or so. I think it was 5 where they're gonna win. But then that stretch in there that was that's got Texas A&M.
It's Auburn,
Alabama,
Oklahoma, and then at South Carolina. That's not easy.
No, it's certainly not. But I think those 3 games, Auburn, Oklahoma, Alabama, you win 2 of those games, okay, I'm sold. But if you lose 2 or 3 of those games, now I think those apprehensions start to set in. But it's going to be a hot start for Missouri.
Totally.
I think they're one of the most interesting teams in the SEC. They haven't created these sort of offseason buzz that Ole Miss has necessarily with the transfers they brought in. But the other thing too, I was talking about this with Zach Blackerby, a Locked On Auburn, the other day. They haven't lost very much. Like they have a lot of their team still in place. They weren't ravaged by the portal, by quote unquote
Theo
bigger
Weiss is
programs.
coming back.
Yes,
Lukey Cooper coming back. Obviously Luther Burden coming back. I mean, 1, 2, 3 right there.
Yeah,
that's enough for me to feel really encouraged. Even without Cody Schrader, even without that run game, a revised run game, let's say, like that's enough to make me feel really confident about what they can do.
And they have one of my favorite combinations in college football. They return their head coach and their quarterback because that is a fleeting thing nowadays. So, a couple fun programs to watch in the SEC this year. Caroline Fenton, Yahoo Sports. Appreciate the time.
Appreciate it.
Big Ten coaches have to win. Everyone's got to win, but who's got to win the most? Might be Lincoln Riley. That's coming up next.